Socrates met Aspasia. That was the time when he started his life as a questioning philosopher. But in Sophist of Plato, we can find Socrates telling a stranger. And now I'm reading from the dialogue of Plato. So here Socrates is saying, "Then do not, stranger, deny us the first favor which we ask of you. I am sure that you will not. And therefore I shall not beg of you to say whether you like and are accustomed to make a long oration on a subject which you want to explain to another, or to proceed by the method of question and answer. I remember hearing a very noble discussion in which Parmenides employed the later of the two methods when I was a young man, and he was far advanced in years. So this is what Socrates is telling us, telling the stranger, and we can find Plato telling us Socrates was a questioning philosopher and he knew this method, philosophical method, when he was a young man. And this was also the time when Socrates met Aspasia for the first time. But here, Parmenides is the one Socrates is referring to. And so, why not Aspasia?
Well, there are all kinds of reasons for not entirely believing Plato in terms of that testimony. So that testimony does suggest that Socrates had met Parmenides, as it says in the Sophist, when Parmenides was an old man and Socrates himself was very young. We wouldn't know what that meant by very young. And did he get his method of questioning from Parmenides? Well, that's the implication that Plato is suggesting there. And to be fair, he doesn't suggest that he got that method from Aspasia at all, because if we agree with the identification of Aspasia and Diotima, Diotima doesn't subject Socrates to Socratic questioning. She actually lays out a doctrine. So whatever Aspasia did, if assuming that, I'm right, that these two will have met when they were in their 20s, around the 440s BC, whatever she did not give Socrates his method of elenchus of questioning. Now, you could say Aristotle's testimony is that Socrates should be known for two or three things. One is his method, which is this question and answer of elenchus. Another is his desire to create definitions. This is something that Aristotle says was key to Socratic thinking. He wanted to create definitions. So he wanted to know what is love, what is courage, what is truth, not just give me examples, but let us define it. And the other thing Aristotle says is he was keen to move from the particular to the general, which I think is another way of saying much the same thing. Instead of particular examples of things, he wanted to know what the general truth of something was. So of those things, the questioning method, the method of elenchus, could perhaps, if that testimony of the sophist is accepted, go back to other influences than Aspasia. What I derive, however, from the symposium, from the way Diotima presents her doctrine, are the other things that Aristotle says are key to what Socrates was interested in. The move from the particular to the general, so people love in this way and that way, but what is love itself? And then the definition, the idea that love can be defined in some way rather than simply that one gives examples. So I see no conflict between the notion that Socrates had different influences. I'm certain, actually, that Parmenides would have been one for various other reasons. But I think that Aspasia also would have had an influence on his philosophical development, and one that Plato perhaps would have been less than happy to be completely upfront about. I mean, what a weird thing it would be in ancient Athens to say Socrates learned some philosophical outlines of thinking from a woman, and let alone from this woman who, because of her influence on Pericles, because of her importance, was reviled by many Athenians, perhaps most Athenians, certainly reviled in comedy. So we have comic plays in which she's called a prostitute and all sorts of names of that kind. And her power is also recognized because she's seen to be Hera when Pericles is Zeus. So the chief of the gods and the wife. Hera is not necessarily someone you would want to be as a woman, a nagging wife, which as she comes across, say, in Homer's Iliad. But these were the kinds of depictions of Aspasia. And Plato, of course, knew them very well. He relies a lot on ancient comedy for his evidence. The clouds, as we've seen in the Apology, is the basis possibly of seeing Socrates as a disreputable, immoral character. And in the Symposium itself, Aristophanes appears as a character, and he lays out a comic scenario of what love must be, which is that human beings originally were these roly-poly characters with 4 arms and 4 legs, and they were so self-satisfied that they didn't sacrifice to the gods, and the chief of the gods, Zeus, split them in half. And now they're always going around looking for their other half. This lovely comic story that Aristophanes tells in the Symposium, nonetheless, is a clear indication of Plato's engagement with comedy. And one of the things that he would have engaged with, therefore, is the notion that Pericles was Zeus, Pericles was this chief of the gods, and Pericles' consort was Hera. So that seems to me to tie in very well with the notion that Diotima in the Symposium is, her name means honored by Zeus, and we know Pericles honored Aspasia. So Diotima is somehow a model for Aspasia, and that what Diotima tells Socrates and what he claims to have learned from her and to know is something that we should take seriously as in the background of his philosophical thinking. Even if, we can rightly, I think, scholars will rightly say, but of course, that's not what Socrates really thought. No, I think there's every indication, even in the Symposium, that he isn't taking Diotima's truth entirely as his own doctrine, not least because it is brought across by Diotima as a doctrine and not as a way of stripping away falsehood. And that is what Socrates ends up by saying is the only way of learning. You don't accept a doctrine. If someone says, this is what love is, this is what truth is, you can't simply accept it. You have to subject it to examination, to elenchus. And therefore, actually, even though he says, I'm going to tell you the aletheia, the truth, it's almost in inverted commas. This is the truth as I learned it from Diotima. But of course, that's not the way Socrates actually believes one gets to the truth. One may never actually achieve the truth. One is simply working towards knowledge, working towards wisdom. That's what philosophia means, love of wisdom. You love something because you pursue it, not because you have it. Sophia itself, wisdom or knowledge, is not something Socrates ever claims to have. So that's where I think, rather long answer, but I think that the very useful citation from the Sophists that you quote probably has some truth in it. I suspect Plato heard Socrates saying, I once listened to Parmenides and his method of questioning. So I think that should come into the background, and I certainly talk about it in the book a bit.